People of Reddit, when is one time you have felt genuine, 100% fear? I got alcohol poisoning and it didn't hit till I was on a train. I had gone to the train bathroom to throw up, but I was dry heaving and I didn't have water, and I could feel myself starting to black out. I was so fricked up I couldn't even see straight enough to figure out how to open the door, and I started to think, oh my god, I'm going to die in a train bathroom with my skirt hiked up. They're going to take pictures of this, oh my god, people are going to see me like this. It was the most afraid for must 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 afraid for must. As I started to see spots, someone grabbed me by the hair, forced a water bottle between my lips and was like, swallow, and I did, and I puked, and I did again, and I puked, and he got another bottle and did the same, and we went like that until I held down a few sips and blood started flowing to my head again. He got off at my stop and walked me home, waited while I threw up a couple times, and made sure my boyfriend was there to take care of me when I got home. The whole time, he was just bitching at me. Just a non-stop flow of, do you understand how much of a burden you've put on other people? I am going to be 3 hours late getting home cause I missed my stop making sure you were alright. This is irresponsible. You need to take better care of yourself, learn your limits, and for frick's sake, if you're not going to do that, at least wear pants just non-stop. He was right, on all counts, of course. That's what I love about Boston. People are buttholes, all of them. But they're buttholes that look out for one another. Very few people meet their guardian angel in person. When my wife almost died during childbirth, scariest day of my life. Couldn't enjoy the feeling of having my first child because I was too worried about losing my wife and being a single father. A 9 years old on a roller coaster, kinda tall but skinny. The belts and locks are in place. Went smoothly until the last bend before stopping. The safety lock went loose a notch. Almost got jostled out of seat to a 8-meter fall onto metal scaffolds and stuff. Saved by my mother's reflex pulling me back. The mom arm, stronger than steel. When I went to get the stretcher out of the back of the ambulance when on scene at a cardiac arrest to realize I left it at the hospital, felt like my heart fell out of my ass. I've never been more scared in my life. Seeing my abuser from childhood again. Every time he'd somehow weasel himself back in, because my parents never knew what he did, and I saw his face, I would get this cold, nauseous and tight feeling inside, normally accompanied by being sick and locking myself in my room. Everyone assumed I was just an antisocial kid, which was partially true, but being a CSA survivor who was repeatedly exposed to my abuser again and again sure didn't help. I was afraid to sleep without someone else in the room, refused to undress unless I was in a room with a door that could be locked, and avoided being in any space near him at all costs. That's fear. PS came back to this after rest and was surprised to see how many people had similar if not the same experience. While it's awful that so many people have had to go through what I did, if not worse, as a small child, it helps and really means a lot that so many people are more kind and understanding than what I ever would have thought. Thank everyone for the kind words and support. You are appreciated. You are valid and you are loved. Never forget that. Last winter I was in the backseat of a truck with my friends. I was in the middle seat and like an idiot I didn't use the seatbelt. We were driving on the highway and over a bridge. We hit ice. All of a sudden we're skidding to the edge of the lane, and I see the 2-foot-tall cement wall on the edge getting closer and we're about to slam into it. I knew we'd of course break it and go over, and I knew I was going to die. In 0.2 seconds I thought, this is how I'll die. I wonder if it'll hurt, if I'll die instantly, if I'll bleed out, if my friends will die around me. I knew I was going to die, and then we bounced off the wall, spun, hit it again, spun, and hit it a third time before stopping. The entire thing, from hitting the ice to stopping, took like half a second, but I knew I was going to die. Everyone was okay, surprisingly minimal damage to the truck too. I was on a roller coaster. My belt didn't close and the train began moving, so I screamed for him to stop. It was 100% fear. I had something similar happen to me. My long hair was caught in the mechanism and we were about to shoot upwards. Think of like a power tower. Screaming to stop the ride. All I could imagine was it snapping my neck if it shot up. The guy did, and I actually had to get cut out. Never again will I wear my hair down to an amusement park. The night I thought my abusive ex-boyfriend was going to kill me. He had been drinking and screaming in my face demanding I tell him where his gun was. I hid it before he got home knowing he was intoxicated. Thankfully, the upstairs neighbors heard him screaming and throwing me around and called the cops who showed up before anything serious could happen. Excuse the lengthy paragraph that's going to follow. I'll try and make it as short as possible. I was going to enter year 11 that year, so I was about 15 years old. I needed to walk to school to register and decided I'd take a shortcut. That street was long, with trees on each side and nobody around. But when I realized my mistake, I was already halfway through it, so I figured I'd continue on my way. At some point, I heard footsteps behind me and turned around. There was a man who had something weird about his demeanor, and I remember immediately feeling it. So I gradually picked up the pace, but he just bolted and got to me, knife in hand. Asked me to give him my phone, which I should have done. That was my first phone, and as a stupid teenager with no money, I sort of thought it'd be a good idea to negotiate so he doesn't take my phone. Dumb idea, cause he asked me to follow him while still pressing the knife against my back, acting like he was just casually holding me. Now, I lived in a small town at the time, so I had to walk 10 minutes like that before finding a police officer to alert. Started screaming, crying, until people eventually surrounded the guy and dragged me out of there. I was informed by a police officer that the man was actually a rapist who had escaped prison months ago. Felt lucky to have escaped that one. WTF, that's scary. That time when a guy stalked me, I was walking to my brother's house, headphones on, so at first I didn't notice him. He followed me for several minutes, then grabbed my shoulder and started yelling at me like a dang possessed. He was yelling that I was a W, that people like me should die and things like that. I was pretty sure he was gonna beat me up, but after that looked like hours of yelling he released me. I ran like I have never ran before, straight to my brother's house, crying all the way. I was working out with a personal trainer, small gym, just for this kind of thing, and we were the only two in there. I finished a pretty rough circuit and he went to the restroom while I recovered. Then I started to feel a tightness in my chest and pain. I started clutching at my chest, thinking no, not now, not like this. I teased too soon, and then I let out the biggest, most powerful burp I've ever had, and immediately felt fine. I'd seen in sitcoms and such where a guy thinks he's having a heart attack and then gets diagnosed with gas, but now I fully understand it. I had a burp like that once. Then when I released it, it took longer than a minute and then I had another panic moment cause I couldn't inhale. I managed to whine help me at my wife before the burp kept going. When it finished, I basically collapsed, gasping for air, and my wife asking me if I just exorcised a demon or some crap, lol. I came home on my lunch break to check on my ill 12-year-old. My abusive ex-husband's car was in my driveway. I had previous restraining orders against him, expired, but divorce decree states he was not allowed in my home for any reason. Clearly, he was there also checking in on our child. Child was fine. BTW, he just had a sinus infection. So I rationally entered my own home. This surprised my ex. He yelled, "What the frick are you doing here?" I calmly replied, because I live here and I'm checking on Mike. The bigger question is, what are you doing in my house? There is a legal order of protection against you. He yelled again, "My god, do I hate you. I'm going to fricking kill you," and he pushed me as he ran to his car. We are both avid gun owners. Sport, protection, conceal carry certified, hunting, the whole 9 yards. Is he going to his car for his gun? How is my son? What was he doing inside my house? Lock the door and check it all out. Son is fine. Nothing is out of order. Okay, fine. Bam 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 bam. X is pounding on the front door demanding my son leave with him. Well crap. Either this is just kind of fricked up or this is when an abusive man breaks and actually kills the woman he hates the most. Obviously, I survived. TL. DR. Ex-husband threatened to kill me in my own home. He plead no contest to disorderly conduct and was on probation for a year. Did community service and paid a fine. I spend more time and money on therapy for that. When they told me that my then 3-year-old son has meningitis and was probably not going to get better. Just for the record, due to some awesome UK doctors, he made a full recovery and walked out of the hospital 4 days later. Last night, I ordered takeaway at a restaurant and their parking lot was full. I drove around for 5 minutes and there wasn't a single parking spot within a quarter-mile radius of the restaurant. Since I was just picking up my food and leaving, I parked my car illegally in the restaurant's lot, leaving my hazards on. I had already paid on the app, so it could not have taken 3 minutes total for me to run in, grab my food, and return to my car being impounded. The 2 people were circling my car and told me that they were with the towing company across the street. They said they watched me circle around the block multiple times before illegally parking and immediately went to impound my car once they saw me park. I told him it was only a minute and I was super sorry. He said he didn't care. It's $125 to get my car back tomorrow morning at 9 AM or $175 right now because of a late night fee. I said that I am a student. I don't have $175 just laying around and I have work at 8 AM that I need my car to get to. They told me that they don't care and they were going to take my car across the street and to come back once I had the money. I apologized more, offered to give them my meal which they refused, and then we were all just standing there for a second. I noticed my car hadn't been booted or anything yet, so I just unlocked it, got in, and left. I go back 8 years ago, to me being very pregnant, 37 weeks, and getting a phone call from my dad at like 7 AM. My mother is diabetic and wears a pump. She had been sick. We thought it was a stomach bug or maybe even the flu. Apparently during the night, she woke up and was throwing up and somehow aspirated in her lungs. About an hour later she woke my dad up and said something wasn't right. He in turn woke my brother up immediately, who carried her down the stairs and put her in the car and drove to the ER. They immediately realized she was going into DKA and also couldn't breathe on her own. So they intubated her. It was a small hospital and they decided to med-flight her to a bigger, more capable one. I have never been so scared in my life. About to give birth to her first grandchild and could lose my mother. How was I ever going to be okay again? It was a very rough couple of weeks, but she did pull through and was by my side when I gave birth. She is my best friend in this world. Someone who always has my back. Losing my parents is one of the scariest things to me. It is so scary. My brother went into DKA earlier this tense and seeing someone go from perfectly fine to lab-board breathing is terrifying. I've had quite a few run-ins with work-related incidents. From rigging failing with a dozen tons of steel overhead to being crushed by a machine with overridden safety interlocks. The ones that really spook me are rotating masses though. Lathe crashes are just a matter of getting away from the chuck as fast as humanly possible and trying everything to stop the awful booming sounds. Well, if that wasn't enough, I picked up a job doing centrifuge repairs. After the better part of a year I got tasked with rebuilding a horizontal centrifuge. Imagine a 55-gallon drum made of 1 inches thick steel spinning at 3,500 RPM plus. And after rebuild I started up and it reaches full speed. Then heck breaks loose. There are solid carbide tiles inside this machine and they all broke off in the span of 2 seconds. The machine started shaking like mad and while I wanted to shut it off, I had to run behind the currently runaway machine that could rip itself apart to do so. That moment had me crouching and terrified as I made my way to the disconnect. I was bullied really badly for all of 5th and 6th grade, and the teacher was even part of the bullying. My depression drove me to do things I never thought I would have done, and I was glad my parents didn't allow me to carry a crafting knife in my pencil case. But it also caused my grades to slip terribly. The teacher would constantly tell me how everything was my fault, insult me, and he'd always say middle school would be like this but 10 times worse. I'd always been scared. The day I graduated I broke down. Everyone was crying a bit because they were sad to leave friends, and they thought I was crying for the same reason, perhaps just more dramatically as I was about to move to another city. But I wasn't. It was the greatest fear I'd ever experienced, because I literally thought I would die in middle school. I hope you're okay now. The first time I heard a gunshot after surviving being shot in the face with a 9mm, it was over a year later. I heard the shot while talking to my BF and I immediately just stopped talking, turned around and bolted for his car. I got inside and started hyperventilating, crying. It took me quite a while to actually stop breathing so heavy, but he talked me through it and calmed me down. True fear, followed by intense embarrassment. When my son started choking, he was about 9 months old and was eating his standard wheat cereal with milk for breakfast and was happily munching away. Then all of a sudden he just stopped. He went silent, totally silent. There was nowhere moving. It was freaking terrifying. Luckily I've had children's first aid training and that and mum instinct kicked in. Slapped him hard on the back with his head pointing to the floor with him over my knee. Multiple slaps. Clog of cereal dislodged and he was able to breathe again. We both collapsed on the floor in tears, had cuddles and generally recovered. Then he wanted to carry on eating his breakfast. He's a trooper. Probably the time I had someone break into my house. At the time it was just me and my mom living alone. For reference, my mom is 4'11" and around 90 pounds. It was a cool calm night and my mom had gone to bed hours earlier. The time was around 11:45 PM or so and I was in my room watching TV. Then I hear the loudest bang and my house alarm goes off. Now this wasn't the first time someone has tried to break in, but I can tell by the bang that someone actually got in this time. I grab my shotgun from my room and go and wake up my mom. I have her wait in the bathroom and I go to clear the house. I have never been more scared for my life than when I was clearing my house with no lights on and not knowing where this possibly crazed lunatic is. I finally clear the main floor and upstairs and there is only one place remaining. The basement. The basement has wooden stairs and is unfinished with very little light down there. I announce myself while trying to not sound afraid for my life, but to no avail. The fear comes out in my words and it's obvious. I finally man up and creep down the loud stairs. As I finally make it to the end of the stairs, I'm faced with my wall with a path to the left or right. Either way, I felt like this was where I would get jumped. I take a few breaths and begin to clear the basement. As I clear my basement heading towards the area where the noise came from, I don't find anything out of place. What I did find was a bird who had crashed into my window so hard it triggered the window sensor to claim it was broken. When I woke up to check on my 2-month-old, since she had missed her 1 AM feeding, and found her with a 102-degree fever. I experienced a heart attack with the age of 21. I thought I'd die during the experience. The pressure and pain in the chest, the numbness of my arms. I puked and everything went dark. Figures I managed to get my heart infected. Everything swelled up and I had water in my heart valves. Not native, excuse me if that's wrong. That's what caused it. I was 100% sure I was done shortly before I went out. I also was alone in Chiang Mai, northern Thailand, preparing for a multiple-day jungle trek. I went to my BNB after getting dinner and a guy pulled me into a small side street and showed me a knife and started to talk in Thai. As I started to unbuckle my backpack, some young guys came into the street and chased the sucker off. They apparently saw what happened. I bought them drinks afterwards. David and friend, I am still grateful if you ever read this. I am an addict in recovery, sober for a little over a year now. Last November 5th, I was in California receiving treatment at a detox facility off of Smith Creek Road. It's called Hell in Vine. All the residents were asleep, except me. I was struggling with insomnia, so I went outside to smoke and talk to a staff member and friend, Anthony Dominguez Mansapit. This is at 1 am. We talk for a moment and he tells me to try to get some rest. I go to my room and close my eyes. 10 minutes later I hear faintly BBBBBT, BBBBBT, BBBBBT. 3 right in a row. I grew up in Detroit and am familiar with the sound of gunshots. I couldn't comprehend that it was actually inside the building and I went to find out what's going on. I found all 3 staff members shot in the head, or what was left of their heads, and lying in a huge pool of blood. I could smell it. I could still see smoke from the semi-automatic pistol. Apparently some nut was being checked in by his girlfriend, and decided frick this place, and my girlfriend shot them all, took my friend Anthony's car, and left. The adrenaline and fear I felt at that moment was beyond comprehension. I dialed 911 and took cover as I did not know where the shooter was, then curled into a ball and threw up on myself. R.I.P. Brittany McCann, Nathaniel Lamont Hill, and Anthony Dominguez Mansapit. Such a mindless, tragic loss of life. I will never be the same. Hiding in a dark mothball closet under the stairs, my mom whispering in my ear, "If he finds us here, he'll kill us." He was my raging stalking stepdad. Being shot at by drunk crazy rednecks. Being home alone and hearing the window in the next room slide up, and then confronting this wannabe burglar. And mice. Nearly everyone I see one. Eek. Have also been shot at by crazy rednecks. Would not recommend. I think I felt that a couple of times so far. Here's one of those occasions. When I was about 10 years old, on a normal school day, during the last hour our teacher gets called outside the classroom by our principal. I remember seeing how worried the principal was. After a couple of minutes the teacher came back, calmed us down and told us very calmly there is a bomb outside the front door of the school. There was a silent panic that swept across the classroom as she proceeded to tell us to hide under our desks. We waited about an hour after the army and bomb diffuser team showed up. Then one by one the families came and picked up their children. I had to walk home alone. Lost control of my car when I was going 80 on the highway. Some guy tried to rapidly merge in between me and the semi-truck in front of me, and I had to make a quick adjustment to keep from hitting him. My car started rapidly swerving as I tried to regain control. At some point I realized I was going to crash, and there wasn't much I could do. The one thought going through my head was don't hit the semi-truck. Don't hit the semi-truck over and over again. I couldn't stop the crash, but I managed to force my car to swerve into the concrete barrier parallel parking style. No damage to the car, no one else involved. I was unhurt. I consider myself to be very lucky. I was on a commercial flight and the pilot came over the tannoy to tell us luck wasn't on our side today and there was an emergency with the flaps and landing gear not working correctly, and that we would have to fly around to burn off the fuel. There would be lots of emergency vehicles to meet us when we did land, but not to worry too much as he'd recently done this emergency in the simulator. Passengers were crying and panicking. No one felt reassured. I genuinely thought we were all going to die. Don't worry too much. I've practiced this recently. I can only imagine how calm nonchalant the pilot sounds whilst announcing this. Last summer I went to Albania on holiday. We were going to land in the capital and then take buses out to some several thousand inhabitants village. A 4-hour bus ride which is very long by European standards. That driver must have been part devil because he drove like a proper maniac. For those of you who don't know, Albania is a mountainous country east across the water from Italy. Now, driving across mountain roads is probably never fun. Being driven across mountain roads is less fun. Being driven across mountain roads in the middle of June, very warm, is even less fun. Being driven across mountain roads in the middle of June when I'm Dutch, you know, the country that is notorious for being flat. Holy crap. I didn't know you could up and down that fast outside of elevators and roller coasters. But wait, it gets worse. Just that stuff would have made me supremely miserable and reconsider how often I call my mother. But this driver must have been driving at least 33% above the speed limit on average, while consistently passing other motorists. In the mountains, on crappy roads, in the middle of sharp mountain road turns. While he's supposed to stay on the inside, he willingly would swerve towards the edge just to be done a few minutes earlier. Frick. I spent approximately 3 hours of that trip slowly coming to terms with my death. I genuinely thought that this would be it. I couldn't communicate with the driver at all, so nothing I did would prevent it. At worst I would cause the accident. If I had to die, I just hoped it'd be fast. So the first of the 3 terror hours was spent in absolute abject fear, the second in growing terror, and the third in a cold-blooded acceptance of death. Next time I'll rent a car, thanks. I would have been absolutely petrified. I'm from Kansas, also very flat and that sounds terrifying. I was trapped in a house with a drunk friend, and 2 men who clearly wanted to have sex with us and were trying their best to make me drink from a, probably spiked, glass. I was sober that night and could think straight, so I refused anything they were trying to give to me, and they looked extremely agitated at my refusal, but I was adamant on not taking any substances. It took me 2 hours to get out of there. When I forced my way out, they looked at me with the creepiest stare and said, "You go, your friend stays." I can never forget how terrified I was. I later found out from my friend that they had tried their best to touch her and raped her whilst I was trying to figure out how to get us out. I was away from her for 2 minutes. She had gone to the toilet. Had a near-death experience on a water sport crazy sofa thing. We told the guide to go fast, but he went as fast as his jet ski could go straight forward. He must have been doing 70 kilometers per hour going forward. Then he stopped and allowed the G-force to swing us around him. This was fast. We were airborne mostly, holding onto little handles. Our grip was getting weaker. Coming off was inevitable. Understanding physics, I knew the water would be hard. It even looked hard moving at that speed. It looked smooth, solid and glistening. We were genuinely terrified. We were screaming, "I can't hold on." Arms and hands like jelly, probably moving at 100 kilometers per hour. During one of the swing maneuvers we bounced. My lower half bounced upward and I became airborne. I just flew away into the distance. My friend, who was still hanging on, said it was almost comical how quickly I disappeared. I woke in the water, face down. 2 out of the 3 clasps of my life jacket had been ripped off. Must have only been out for a few seconds. I recall skimming across the water, too fast to penetrate. Then, I started flipping across the surface, limbs everywhere. I don't even remember entering the water. My friend and I were giddy with adrenaline the rest of the day. The next day I had to go to doctor for a painkiller shot for my bruised ribs. I couldn't even sit up from the laying position without being in agony. My friend hurt his back and ankle. My 2-year-old son having a seizure. He went to bed fine. Woke up in the middle of the night very hot. We took his temp. 102.3. No way. That must be wrong. Check it again. 102.6. Suddenly, his eyes rolled back and he started shaking. We rushed him to the bathtub. No idea what to do. Panic. Tears. Overreaction time. Call to 911. Rush to the ER. Not my best dad moment but genuine. 100% fear. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.